The Department of Justice releasing the FICE application. Heavily redacted.
This page, and then this page, and I was really stunned on this page.
And this is so bad that they ought to be looking at the judges who signed off on this stuff.
The great mystery is why the president has not spoken up for our country. The best way to deal with that is to vote in November.
It's just obvious to me that she's going to do everything she can to get herself inserted into the 2020 race. She's running for president.
A woman is killed during a supermarket standoff. Up to 50 people were inside a Los Angeles Trader Joe's when the terrifying siege began. The 3-hour standoff ended when the suspect walked out in handcuffs.
You would have declared your support for ICE agents.
Let me show you how country feels.
How country feels. You know how I'm feeling this morning? I have like a junk food hangover. Is that a thing? I know you never get it because your body's like just a bottomless pit.
Garbage disposal.
Can.
Of alcohol and junk food and red meat. That's
You're
it.
used to it.
And you learn something new every day. For instance, I learned that going for a run after eating a bunch of pizza and Doritos is not a great idea. You can try it, but it's not going to work out well.
Yeah, but at least you went for all of us.
It's cleansing. You went for 6 miles, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did the loop in Central Park. If you're ever here, not on a rainy day like today, but yesterday was gorgeous. It's really awesome. Everybody's out, and it's a good time.
Yeah, and always.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Pete.
No, I have nothing. You don't want to hear what I have to say. Less than 6% of our audience, including myself, will not be running 6 miles today.
Me included. I agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're here, and we're watching television because there's a lot of news going on, as there always is. We do want to turn now to our top story of the morning. The Department of Justice releasing hundreds of FISA documents.
The 400-plus heavily redacted pages revealing the infamous Steele dossier led to the warrant that allowed surveillance leading up to the 2016 election.
Our own Garrett Tenney is live in Washington with the gritty details. Garrett, good morning.
Hey, good morning, y'all. You know, some of the most heavily redacted pages in these documents are those that have the details of the FBI's justification for the request to wiretap former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. One thing that is clear in the unredacted sections, though, is that the Democrat-funded Steele dossier played a significant role in the initial foreign intelligence surveillance application, which was submitted in October 2016. The FBI stated, quote, "It believes Page has been the subject of targeted recruitment by the Russian government to undermine and influence the outcome of the 2016 U.S. presidential election in violation of U.S. criminal law." The documents also include several renewal applications to extend surveillance of Page. And the last renewal in late spring 2017 is significant because at that point, the FBI had dumped Christopher Steele as a source after he misled them over his media contacts. As the documents state, subsequently, the FBI closed source number 1 as an FBI source. Despite that, the FBI said that Steele was still reliable based on his previous work, though the visible sections of the renewal application don't indicate the dossier was verified. Carter Page has said all along that he did nothing wrong and was never a spy for Russia, and last night he told Fox News, quote, "I'm having trouble finding any small bit of this document that rises above complete ignorance and or insanity." This morning, President Trump also weighed in on the documents, tweeting in part, "As usual, they are ridiculously heavily redacted, but confirm with little doubt that the Department of Justice and FBI misled the courts, witch hunt rigged, a scam." Now, in March, reports of these documents prompted the Justice Department's Inspector General to launch an investigation into potential FISA abuses, and that review is ongoing. Abby, Pete, and Griff.
All right, Garrett Tenney live for us.
Thanks, Garrett. Good job.
Only more questions are raised this morning, Griff.
That's right. So, Griff, you read all 400 pages, and I was really impressed. And then Abby reminded me it's not that impressive when you consider how much of it is redacted.
There are about 10 pages you could actually read in it.
Well, that's why you've got the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows, right, who's been a leading voice on all this stuff, saying, and if we'll just put his tweet up here, he's saying potentially groundbreaking development here. This Carter Page FISA docs should be declassified and further unredacted, protecting only sources and methods, so Americans can know the truth. If the previous administration was funneling campaign research towards surveillance, we need to know.
We need to know. And you know, as much as it was redacted, we learn a lot from this, too. And it stuck out to me as I was reading it this morning. I'm going to hold it up every hour, and it's worth holding up. Source number 1 in this document was the Christopher Steele dossier. Not just a source or one of source number one was the unverified, salacious, dirty dossier paid for by Democrats. They hit piece against Trump. They allude to the fact that, that the document was looking for information that could discredit candidate number one, who's Donald Trump, in the document. The other thing that stuck out at me, and again, you could read any page and find something of interest, that these same authorities given with the FICE applications mean that incidentally they could have been inquiring information on other members, which leads you to believe Carter Page was just the foot, just the nose under the tent to surveil the Trump campaign and find out what they could.
So there are a number of people fired up this morning after getting these documents yesterday. Andrew McCarthy is one of those. He's a former U.S. attorney for New York Southern District, and he was on just less than an hour ago, and he talked about the folks that signed off on this, including James Comey, who obviously is no longer there, but the judges as well. Here's what he had to say about that.
I'm really embarrassed because I told people for months that this could never, ever happen. What I told people was that you're not even going to hear about the dossier when we finally learn what's in the FISA warrants. When you read this thing, it's astonishing. They actually, it's as if they took the dossier and slapped whole cloth district court caption on it and gave it to the judge, which I must say, I mean, this is so bad that they ought to be looking at the judges who signed off on this stuff, not just the people who gave it.
Now, to give a little context there, the reason why Andy is saying the judges should be looked at is because we see on page 53, as he pointed out, a line here that says the FBI has reviewed this verified application for accuracy. And as you point out, source number one, the Steele dossier, Christopher Steele was ultimately dismissed as source number one. The dossier is in no way was it ever verified, and so the judges Collier and I forget the other one's name, they're out there, they're known. There's certainly questions for them, as Andy points out.
So let me get this right. Christopher Steele, who put together this dossier, he was deemed discredited, but then the dossier put together was used as evidence to ultimately get this FISA warrant.
Exactly, and to get it reapproved twice. And Andy McCarthy also pointing out that it was open source news reports that helped get them continued reapplications of the FISA. If they had evidence, that should have been used to get reapproval of the application.
And Andy blasted that as well. Take a listen.
What they did here was they have this guy Steele who helped them in another case. And they don't have any idea who his sources are. His sources are unidentified. They're Russians. And they themselves are operating on hearsay information. So for the most part, even his sources are not claiming that they saw and heard the things that they're asking the judge to rely on.
You mentioned Comey briefly, Griff. As I was reading this, I couldn't get past what I'm calling the deep state signature page. Everyone would have to sign off on this. The only signature is James Comey, but ultimately it's got to go through John Kerry, Andy McCabe, Brennan, Clapper, Susan Rice. On the next page is Sally Yates, who, remember, resigned in order to resist this president. All people who wanted Hillary Clinton to win, loathed this president. And as a result, how can you trust that in good faith what they were seeking was just information on Carter Page to see if he was working with Russians, or whether or not they had a desire to find out if Donald Trump was the source.
Don't forget, too, one of those signatures is Rod Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General. And as Garrettini pointed out in that great report, I'm going back to report tomorrow morning for you guys. I'm sure will be something to do with this story, because there's real questions now. In the last hour, Dave Bossie calling for Rosenstein to recuse himself about why, once Christopher Steele has been dismissed as FBI source number one, why do you still sign and move forward this warrant?
And how do you still get to oversee the Mueller investigation when you're that conflicted? You've been a part of the poison source of it, yet you're still there. Sessions recuses himself, Abby, but Rosenstein stays and oversees it as if he's a bastion.
You mentioned the Mueller probe. By the way, if you're trying to follow all of this, because it does get very much in the weeds and it's complicated, but all of this evidence has ultimately led to this Mueller investigation into the handling the Russia probe and Trump's relationship with Russia and everything that's going on right now all goes back to these documents and ultimately the evidence that was used to survey to surveil people on the Trump campaign. So a lot of big questions remain, including Rod Rosenstein, who may very well have to sit down in a hearing and answer these questions, because I think there are a lot of people in this country that are fed up.
So if it's based on bunk, it's pretty hard to believe that the investigation itself is anything other than
And
bunk.
don't forget that the Steele dossier was commissioned and paid for by the DNC, by Hillary Clinton. In this report, Fox News believes that Glenn Simpson, who ran GPS, and I really don't want to get people lost in the weeds, but we're basically talking about the main source that goes back to something, a document that was paid for by the DNC.
But that was left out of it, Griff. That's what Judicial Watch is reporting. That then when they gave over their evidence to the courts, they left out the involvement of Hillary Clinton and the DNC. When, as you're saying, that is a huge part of this, right? That brings up the politics and all of this. And when you're dealing with the FBI and the DOJ, politics should never be part of that decision-making, part of the process.
Amen. And, you know, we had two other topics we were going to talk about during this.
We didn't even get there.
And we didn't get to them. You know why? Because we're just as fascinated by this. If we've spent 19 months being bombarded with Russia, and this investigation trying to discredit this president, you finally get access to 400 pages of the FICE application. You want to know what they based it on. And now we know.
Well, not really.
That's why we're talking about it.
It's still so redacted.
True.
Right? So I think there's still going to be a lot of questions of if it's really just trying to hide your sources and hide your methods, is it going to take up all that room?
Listen.
In the report?
Stay tuned. There's a whole lot more coming on this, not just today and in the days and weeks to come.
You're going to be on it, Griff. I know that. All right, we've got a lot of news coming into our newsroom, starting with this Fox News alert, and a serious one. A woman is killed during a supermarket standoff. Up to 50 people were inside a Los Angeles Trader Joe's when the terrifying siege began.
I hear about 6 more shots, so I'm pretty sure they were returning fire at him. Just a scary moment.
Then I saw people just running towards the back of the store, so I knew that, something was wrong.
People were running for their lives as others escaped through windows. A Trader Joe's employee was shot dead inside of that Trader Joe's. The 3-hour standoff ended when the suspect walked out in handcuffs. You can see right there. Well, earlier in the day, the suspect shot his girlfriend and his grandmother, who are in critical condition. And there's this. We now know that the doomed duck boat killed 17 people on board, faced near hurricane winds. NTSB officials saying winds reached 73 miles per hour with waves at 4 feet high when the tourist boat capsized in Branson, Missouri. The state's attorney general now demanding answers as to why the vessel changed routes that day. The hospital released 2 survivors overnight. And Vice President Mike Pence giving a boost of support to Georgia gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp.
Brian Kemp is the real deal. He puts his family first. And when Brian Kemp becomes governor, he'll always put Georgia families first.
The support coming ahead of Tuesday's election against Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle. The president also endorsing Kemp on Twitter, writing this quote, "Brian is very strong on crime and borders, loves our military vets and the Second Amendment. He will be a great governor." And a trio of Americans leading the way at the British Open.
It and it takes a trip around, but
Jordan Spieth is part of the 3-way tie atop the leaderboard in Scotland. He and 2 others are 9 under, heading into today's final round. Tiger Woods is just 4 shots off the pace at 5 under. He's still in this thing.
Wow. That red shirt will be out today. We'll see what happens. All right, well, the massive manhunt intensifying for the gunman who killed the former heart doctor of President H.W. Bush. One of his friends and colleagues joins us next.
Plus, a scary moment caught on camera. A circus performer blasts out of a cannon but overshoots the net. What happened next?
And a special delivery, a mom giving birth in a Chick-fil-A bathroom. We reported this yesterday, and the dad wrapping his newborn daughter in the shirt off of his back, a Trump 2020 shirt. Those parents are joining us live with their little nugget just ahead. It's an interview you don't want to miss.
How sweet it is.
Well, this morning, a massive manhunt still underway for the murderer who fatally shot President George H.W. Bush's former doctor on a Texas street in broad daylight as he rode his bike to work. Dr. Neil Kleinman is a medical director at Houston Methodist and worked with Dr. Mark Housknecht on a regular basis, and he joins us now. First, doctor, my sympathies go out to you. I mean, I know you're dealing with a lot. He was someone that you worked with for a very long time and a very, very good friend of yours. So our thoughts and our prayers are with you and his family and everyone who knew this man. Tell us about him. Who was he?
Well, he and I started practice at exactly the same time. I won't quite tell you how many years ago, but it's more than 30. We sort of grew up together. Our kids grew up together. He was an amazing colleague, and he was a close personal friend.
Yeah, and it's something you never...
and I think in many ways he was a role model.
When you listen to George H.W. Bush talk about, he was his cardiologist, he talks about him not just as a great doctor, but just a good man. He talks about him as a great friend, and as you said, just a good role model in life. This is something that you never think could happen to you or someone that you care for, just in broad daylight in the morning, riding your bike around the medical center there in Houston, being shot. I mean, what is going through your mind right now?
Well, first of all, sadness. Emotionally, it's a very tough thing to deal with. I think we all experience that in the medical community. And, you know, this is completely a bolt out of the blue. The medical center is generally regarded to be almost a protected environment. Yeah. And, you know, between 8:30 and 9 in the morning, in broad daylight, in the middle of the medical center, you know, you're surrounded by people who've got one concern on their mind, and that's getting to work. So, you know, who could have done this? How could this have happened? It's completely unnerving and very much baffling.
When you have a VIP patient, obviously that relationship is very much confidential, and that's the way it should be. But what can you tell us about the relationship that George H.W. Bush had with him? Obviously they worked together, but they were great friends.
Yeah, the truth is I don't have any information about that. You know, the rules are pretty clear. When there's, with any patient, you know only what you need to know. You don't go looking in other people's records. And, you know, that's particularly so with a VIP. Particularly somebody who's an ex-president. So that's a topic that really was off limits, even for casual dinner conversation among friends.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be.
But, you know, I will tell you one thing. I read President Bush's statements, and I don't think that they were political hyperbole. I think they were spot on. I think they were very honest descriptions of Mark's character and his personality, as well as his medical ability.
Yeah. Dr. Kleinman, our thoughts go out to you and everyone who knew him. Thank you for being with us. We are so sorry for your loss. He sounds like an incredible man. Thank you so much.
He certainly was. Thank you.
We'll be back right after this.
Some quick headlines for you. A young woman is fighting for her life after being struck by lightning at a country music festival. 22-year-old Brittany Preen was on her cell phone at the time. The lightning bolt traveling from her ear through her body and down to her foot, disintegrating her boot at a Wisconsin campground. Basically blew it up. Wow. Hope she's all right. And a circus stunt goes horribly wrong after a performer shoots out of a cannon but misses the safety net. The entertainer known as Bullet Man taking a hard landing in the stands in Chile over the net. Look at that. Whoa. Breaking his jaw and both his legs, thankfully, wasn't killed. Cannon operator taking the blame for not disconnecting a pressure hose before the launch strikes me as more than a minor oversight. Also, I couldn't read the word in the prompter. It's disintegrating.
That's a tough one.
Well, if you know how to read, you could read it, but I messed it up.
It's the right
Just glad that guy's okay.
Unbelievable. All right, this is an adorable story. Expectant parents were on their way to the hospital with their baby, and they had other ideas. I guess their baby did. This little nugget was born Tuesday night at a Chick-fil-A in Texas.
Delivered by her father, who wrapped the new baby in a Trump 2020 shirt until the paramedics arrived.
Joining us to share their incredible story, Robert and Fallon Griffin and their baby daughter, Gracelyn May Violet Griffin. I love the Griffin name, guys. What an amazing, amazing story. What are your thoughts this morning?
Just still trying to wrap our head around it. It's been a pretty crazy week.
Absolutely.
To say the least.
To say the least. Okay, so Fallon, you are about to give birth. You weren't planning to do it outside and go into a Chick-fil-A. You're the one that did the heavy lifting here. Talk to us about what's going through your head as this is all happening.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, that day we were on our way, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon that day. I had seen our doctor, my maternal fetal medicine doctor, to find out if I was even progressing along, you know, with the pregnancy. And it was our 38-week checkup, and he tells me, okay, you're 3 centimeters. So I'm like, oh wow. So do we go to the hospital? Because we had, you know, prepared this for a long time. And I'm like, I have the bags ready. Should I go to the hospital? And he says, nah, it's okay. It's going to take about 3 days, maybe a week or so, but just go home, relax, take it easy, go take a bath. And so we're like, okay. So we went on our merry way, went home and went about our day, and about 7 o'clock or so that evening, the contractions started to get stronger, and I just kind of I think I was in denial a little bit about that it was happening, because I just, you know, was going with what the doctor had told me. So I was like, honey, I think it's time. I think we should start, you know, heading to the hospital.
Wait, how did you end up in a Chick-fil-A, though?
And you did. I mean, you have the Chick-fil-A cow behind you.
But how'd you land there?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you tell me that.
So the hospital, there's a specific hospital. We live out in the country. We live in Hill Country, Texas. So the hospital is 45 miles from our house. So when she says, you know, I think we should go, we were totally prepared. The car had been packed for a month. There's not a hospital between us and the hospital we were intended to go to. It's not like we drove by 17 hospitals. The reason why we picked Chick-fil-A is one of our friends in town was going to watch our older girls, they're 6 and 9, so that we could just go straight to the hospital from there. It was very convenient, right off the highway, quick, just jump out in the parking lot, hand off the kids, and away we go. And
so Robert,
I realized when we were in the parking lot, I thought, hey, this might be an opportunity to use the restroom. I really have to go. And my contractions again were just severe, and I was in excruciating pain. And I realized it was the only lit up store in the parking lot, and I thought, let's just see if they'll open the door for me. So you know, and waddling my way through, like, here we were in the situation.
And they let you in.
Taken care of, and I'm like, let me in. And for all they knew, it was some lunatic at the door banging on the door. But then they saw me, and I was, you know, full on pregnant, and so they graciously let us in, and I made my way to the first
and then
stall.
Robert, you ended up having to step in. I can't imagine you have delivered a baby before in your life. I mean, you've been in the room, I'm sure, when your other kids were born, but you had to step in and help deliver this baby, to which you then had to wrap her, take the shirt off your back. Tell us what was going through your mind and what you were doing in this moment.
Well, by the time she had made it into the bathroom, I was putting our kids into our friend's car and kissing them goodnight, and then I heard who turned out to be the night manager at the Chick-fil-A say, hey, your wife's in the bathroom and she's screaming. So I ran in there, and we got the door unlocked, and she was standing. And that's how we delivered the baby, was standing up.
Yeah, I was straddling the toilet, and my water literally had broken. Like,
as I walked in,
he walked in, and he
like
saw.
I looked around, and she was just barely crowning, and I said, "Baby, we're going to do something great, but we're going to do it right here, and we're going to do it right now."
So I didn't even. I was like, okay, and I was just like, you know, of course, and my body was in like such a severe shock at the moment. I don't know how women do this every day.
She stood up the whole time.
I stood up the whole time, holding.
Yeah.
Well, at one point, with my right hand, holding her head in, making sure that I wasn't going to drop her in the toilet. That's the honest truth. I was just so concerned about dropping her.
Wow.
And then, of course, he was behind me, and not only was he an amazing coach through it all. He was so supportive. He was also, of course, he took a role of husband, coach, nurse, doctor, and I can't even imagine what I would have done if it was just me. There's no way that I could have brought a baby into the world by myself.
But one other thing too, guys, is that after a little couple of things with the cord being wrapped around her neck a couple of times, and
there were some serious moments in that.
Some stuff in
there were, and Chick-fil-A staff, they were just amazing.
And they've given you guys, Robert, let me just quickly, because we're almost out of time, Chick-fil-A's giving you guys chicken for life. They're giving you some gifts.
And a job.
Yes, and that's by the husband and wife that own that store. That's not from Chick-fil-A corporate, which they're amazing. The company's just amazing, but this is all very local. Wow. The Chick-fil-A for life, and they've guaranteed her a job. They gave her a certificate of a job when she turns 14 or 16. It's all from the owners of that store here in our little hill country town. So,
Robert Fallon, we are just so glad that Mommy and Baby are doing great. She is set for life. She is beautiful. Thank you guys so much for being with us. Really well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we've got more Fox Friends. It can't get any better than that, but we're going to try on the other side.
We are back with some headlines, and we begin with a Fox News alert. The war on cops striking overnight. A Florida officer shot during a gunfight. The Fort Myers cop now in stable condition after emergency surgery. The suspect is in custody in Texas. A 32-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department killed while blocking traffic during a funeral escort for a fellow officer. A suspected drunk driver facing charges now for hitting Senior Corporal Earl Jamie Givens. So heartbreaking. Also, a convicted terrorist will be able to keep his U.S. citizenship. Lawyers arguing that Iman Ferris lied on immigration papers to obtain citizenship back in 1999. But a federal judge ruled there is no evidence of that. Ferris admitted to scoping out the Brooklyn Bridge as part of an al-Qaeda plot to destroy it. He is set to be released from prison in 2020. Also this, Hillary Clinton takes the stage at Ozzy Fest and taking a moment to slam President Trump.
The great mystery is why the president has not spoken up for our country. Yes. And we saw that most clearly in this recent meeting with Putin.
Well, the failed presidential candidate suggesting that Vladimir Putin played the president during that Helsinki summit. And there's this. A liberal senator, Kamala Harris, wants the federal government to control rent prices. She tweeted this out, quote, nationally, over 21 million Americans spend more than 30% of their paychecks on rent. That's absurd. I introduced the Rent Relief Act to help ease this burden. This equals more money in people's pockets at the end of the year. I will leave it there. Pete, take it away.
Abby, thank you. Well, government restrictions on religion around the world rising for the second year in a row, climbing from 25% to 28% in 2016, according to a new Pew Research study. So climbing back up from an even higher level in 2012. Here to discuss, Jenna Browder, host of Faith Nation on CBN, and Muslim scholar and author Dr. Kanta Ahmed. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here. I'm going to ask kind of slightly different questions of both of you. Jenna, when you look at religious restrictions in the context of America or the West, is this because folks are pushing back on freedom of religion, preferring freedom from religion? Why is this happening in your view?
Yeah, you know, I think whenever you have one force going one way, you're going to have the other force pushing back against it. I will say, under this administration, the Trump administration, they have made religious freedom and promoting religious freedom, not just for Christians, but for all faiths, a top priority moving forward as we head further into 2018 and into 2019. We're talking about, you know, a religious freedom executive order. We're talking about the president just recently taking a strong strong stand on Twitter for Pastor Brunson, who's imprisoned in Turkey, speaking out against Nigeria and the persecution of Christians there. So I definitely think you have certain forces pushing back against each other, Pete.
Absolutely. Dr. Ahmed, I want to get your commentary on how religion is being treated in the West, but also in the Muslim world, in places where governments maybe are cracking down on extremists. That could be the other side of this. They don't want Islamic extremism on the rise, so they're cracking down. Where do you see this cutting?
I mean, in the Muslim world, the governments are very much in line with this president's philosophy. I have traveled both in Iraq and also in Egypt and met with the military and security forces there who recognize President Trump is combating extremism. Muslim countries do have a problem with religious freedom in many places. Think of Saudi Arabia, where it's not possible to worship other religions. Think of Pakistan, where persecution of minorities is legalized in many extents. But there is now a unification to fight the political ideology of Islamism. In the United States, let's not forget, the government of the United States offers no sanction to bigotry, offers no permission to persecute, paraphrasing the words of George Washington in 1790. And I believe we are trying to live by that in this presidency. Yeah, a lot of different shades and angles to this for sure. Jenna, another topic I want to get your take on is we heard a news story this week. An Air Force base, F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, has agreed to replace a Bible with a generic book of faith. Now, this table, I've been through a lot of Army ceremonies, and what it is, it's a table seated for one, and it is meant to remind everyone at that ceremony that you've got missing in action and prisoners of war who are not at this event because they gave their life or they're still in captivity. And part of making it through that captivity is your faith, reminding that you're part of something greater than yourself. So the Holy Book, the Holy Bible, is there. Yet, why would we go to the lengths of replacing it? What kind of pressure could be put on where you would go generic?
Yeah, you know, Pete, I think it's an unfortunate day for the military and for America. You know, are we at a point that we can no longer honor the Judeo-Christian principles that this country was founded on, or the men, the former prisoners of war who inspired this sacred tradition with their testimonies, pointing to their faith, their Christian faith, as the reason for getting through their captivity. So I think it's really important to point out all of this, and also there's the old saying, Pete, that goes, there are no atheists in foxholes. Yep. You know, religion, whether it's Christianity or just faith, you know, belief in something bigger than yourself, is so important to people in our military. And I would hope that the active men and women today would take a stand for faith, for this sacred tradition, and for all people of faith.
Of course, that's why we have chaplains in the military as well. Dr. Ahmed, as a Muslim scholar, do you have a problem with the Holy Bible being on that table?
Absolutely not. Quite the converse. Islam recognizes and requires Muslims to believe in the Bible and also in the Torah. So it's an offense to me as an American. It's also an offense to me as a Muslim to have the Bible removed. Remember, I've just been with the Kurdish Peshmerga who risked their lives and limb, lost hundreds of officers, hundreds and thousands of families destroyed by ISIS, who would like to see the removal and erasure of Christianity. And I don't want to tar the United States Air Force. I understood very well how the United States Air Force helped the Kurdish Peshmerga repel ISIS, so I have great regard for our Air Force. But this is not in keeping with the Air Force's values, with American values, or values of any faith-based people. The Bible belongs on those tables.
You know, that's a great point. Usually it's one person making a weak-kneed decision that allows something like this to happen. Great perspective. Jenna and Dr. Ahmed, thank you for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete.
You got it. All right, well, socialists becoming the mainstream of the left.
Definition of democratic socialism to me, again, is the fact that in a modern, moral, and wealthy society, no American should be too poor to live.
The Associated Press now pointing out a socialism surge in the age of Trump. But what does it really say about the Democratic Party? We will discuss that next. Do they really want to fully embrace socialism? Plus, a Democrat supports ICE in a debate and gets booed. We'll show you more from this outrageous debate from Arizona coming up.
Welcome back. Well, you may have heard a lot of President Trump's critics complain about the dark times that we are living in, but a new op-ed gives them a much-needed reality check.
Bethany Mandel writes, a person born in 1911 experienced between their 18th and 20th birthday, Great Depression, 40th birthday, excuse me, the Great Depression, Pearl Harbor, World War II, the Cold War, and the risk of nuclear war, the Korean War, and the rise of communist China. Perhaps we should keep that in mind the next time we refer to 2018 as dark times.
Bethany Mandel joins us now with more on this. She's an editor at Ricochet and a New York Post contributor. Bethany, great piece.
Thanks.
Fascinating. My favorite part is where you talk about millennials and you say one of the favorite adages of woke millennials is check your privilege.
Yeah.
Certainly applies here.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy to me that we talk about how hard it is to live in America. And I've lived in the third world. And let me tell you, we've got it pretty easy here, and we've always had it easy. And this is just sort of a representation of the fact that so many of my generation always had a president that they liked. And so along comes a president that they don't like, and all of a sudden it's end times. And it's really not affecting their day-to-day lives in any meaningful way at all.
It's gotten so bad that you can't even talk about anything good going on in this country.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the economy. You say, you know what, things are going well, but in your piece you say that, Democrats, for example, can't even point to anything positive because they might be giving the president credit for something, and we just can't have that.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy to me is more like your personal life, and when people's personal lives are going well. I gave an example of James Vanderbeek had a baby, and on his Instagram post, it was like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph about child separation at the border, which is a horribly tragic, painful thing. But then at the end, that last line, oh, by the way, her name is Gwendolyn. It's like, this is actually just a birth announcement, and it's not a political diatribe. And imagine what Gwendolyn's going to think when she sees her birth announcement in 15 or 20 years. Yeah. You guys were more focused on President Trump than you were on me on my birthday? I know that I'm the 5th, but come on, guys.
Yeah. Gwendolyn is a great name. I'm biased myself. But what does it tell you about not understanding history? When you think in this little fishbowl you live in right now, it's got to be the darkest, worst times. And it's what a great reminder you give of that analogy. We've been through some tough times.
Yeah, we've had presidents assassinated. We've lived through the world wars. And at the end of the day, I mean, you don't have to like the president. I don't like the president every day. But I can still be happy in my day-to-day life. And I can still appreciate, like you said, the economy is doing really well. We have.
So how do we as people, as friends, as family, help each other out? Because it's gotten so bad where, even in my own family, you can't talk about politics anymore because it is so divisive, and even just the name Trump coming up, I mean, all hell can break loose.
I know.
So what advice do you have for people today of how we can actually get along better? How can we talk about our daily lives in a way that it just doesn't stop at the word of Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know, because it's gotten to the point where you can't even say that you have had happiness in your personal life without adding a caveat.
You
There's
say
an
that.
asterisk.
Exactly. You say you're not a Trump supporter per se. You're just like, can't I just be happy?
Yeah, and I'm not apologetic about it. And there was one hysterical tweet that said, I was dry heaving and I was in the fetal position in the shower, and I'm like, I buried both of my parents before my 20th birthday, and I don't even think I did that. Like, you got to have a little bit of perspective. Like, so Hillary Clinton wasn't elected. Like, I wasn't the happiest person in the world on election night either, but like, woke up the next morning, got my kids dressed, and
Bethany, great piece. I'm actually putting my daughter's going on a broad trip today.
Nice.
She's 16, and get a little bit of perspective, because as you point out, you go other places, you realize how good we got it here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bethany.
And you also had your baby in a car, delivered in the car. So that's
I should have been on the last segment.
Crazy delivery story.
Mazel tov to that family.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for being here. All right. What's funny about this? Comedian Michelle Wolf comparing ICE to terrorists.
Take it from me. No organization is better than ISIS.
Joey Jones lost both his legs in a bomb blast while fighting terrorists in Afghanistan. Hear his reaction next hour.
Welcome back. Well, it is debate season, of course, for primaries and general elections. More politics to come as we move toward the 2018 elections. One debate in particular caught all of our eyes on the Democratic side. Arizona's 2nd Congressional District. A Democratic congressional candidate. Her name is Ann Kirkpatrick. She's a former representative. She's now running for a seat again. And they did in these debates what they oftentimes do. Raise your hand if you support this or you support that. Yeah, it's tough, but you got to have the courage to do it or not do it. Questions were asked about, do you support ICE, and are you okay with what Maxine Waters has said? She raised her hand and everyone else didn't. Look what happened to her when she did. Listen.
I just want to be really clear. If you would have declared your support for ICE agents without any increased oversight, would you have supported Democratic leadership in condemning Ms. Waters' comments?
Not only did she raise her hand, Griff, she didn't even hesitate.
No, and you know what's significant about that is that just this past week, the Republicans tried to bring to the floor a bill that condemned ICE, that was going to abolish ICE, ultimately. They ended up not doing that. Instead, they voted on a bill to support ICE, but that was because Republicans wanted Democrats on record, and there you have one woman saying, look, I'm going to support law enforcement officers carrying out the laws made by politicians.
And I condemn harassment of political opponents, so I raised my hand. Again, I get booed.
You can often get a sense of where political parties are at the localest of levels, and I think this was a real indication of where the Democratic Party is and where people like her go. If you find yourself as a Democrat, but you aren't as extreme as some of those that have the loudest voices in the party calling for abolishing ICE and open borders and things like that, can you win elections? This is going to be the big debate within the Democratic Party.
We shall see what the response is for her. A couple of responses you've sent, and we asked you for them. A tweet from Mike said, these folks have no clue about ICE's mission.
This tweet comes in from Jackson, says the modern Democrat Party is so far left, if a candidate espouses anything not radical left, you get booed by liberal voters.
Yeah.
It's a tough place to be.
Yeah, when you're not left and it's going hard left, you got a choice to make. She made a courageous one. We'll see what happens on the ballot box.
For standing for a woman who's telling people to harass whoever
yeah, she shouldn't be that courageous.
I mean,
You're right.
She did the right thing there, but I wish there were more people raising their hands in those moments. Yeah, all right, coming up on the show, the DOJ releases hundreds of FISA documents, and there are new bombshells you don't want to miss. That's next.
And millennials outraged after a baseball team hosts Millennial Night with selfie stations, napping stations, and participation ribbons.
His favorite.
So did the marketing strategy work? I really wanted to go to the game. The team's VP of fan engagement, the game was last night, joins us live next hour.